One thing that is worth talking about every once in a while, and maybe this is a good time to talk about it, because upsets are upsetting, but upsets that during the holidays are more upsetting because they're not supposed to happen during the holidays. So you get upset because you're upset, and then you're upset about what you're upset about too. And depending upon the situation, the upset can range anywhere from just being annoyed, frustrated, intolerant, impatient, or outright angry, or depressed, or anxious. When we talk about meditation, we talk about it as a refuge. You know, it's a refuge, just like when we talk about the three gems in Buddhism, the Sangha, the Dharma, and the Buddha, and that's talked about as a refuge. It's a place for safety. It's a place that you can go to get out of danger, refuge. And so the thing about it, though, that is, if you're not practiced enough in experiencing this refuge, this state of being, and you get hit with the tidal wave of emotion, or you get hit with something that's unexpectedly upsetting, it could feel overwhelming, and you could feel like you're crazy, and you could feel like you're in danger, and what you're in danger of is allowing the upset to determine what you do and what you say. So if that happens, then the upset gets worse, because usually when you're upset, what you do and what you say doesn't work. It's not workable. Usually creates more damage, usually creates worse upset. And that can perpetuate very quickly, you know. So one of the things that I recommend is, if you're in a relationship or you're married and you get triggered and you get into an upset, and you're really feeling crazy and angry, and you're having all of these thoughts about protecting yourself and about being right and about escaping or upping the attack. Because when you have strong emotions like that, especially about things that are as vulnerable in your life as your relationships with the people close to you, it can go very quickly from being frustrated and angry to being enraged. And when you're in an enraged state of mind, the kind of thinking that goes on there is absolute. When you're in an enraged state of mind, the kind of thinking that goes on there is the kind of thinking that ends up in divorces, or the kind of thinking that ends up in physical violence, or withdrawing in the relationship and being unavailable. So there can be long-term consequences to being stuck in an upset state and not being able to get any refuge, not being able to get any relief. So one of the things that's important to understand is that if you find yourself in that situation, if you find yourself very upset about anything, and you find that your thoughts are radical, your thoughts are serious, your thoughts are thoughts about behaving in a way that is going to have serious consequences, at least train yourself not to act. You can wait until the storm passes, and if it's still evident to you that you should do something to change, or you should make some changes, or you should do something different, you can do it there with yourself centered and grounded. You know, we often talk about the fact that impermanence is the source of suffering. You know, impermanence is in Buddhism, it's called anicca. It means that everything is impermanent, everything passes, nothing stays the same ever. And this is the source of suffering, because your life will end, and everything that you have you will lose, and everything that is the way it is now will change, and nothing stays the same. And if you're old enough and you're into the phase of old age, sickness, and death, this has a lot more serious consequences, because what's changing and what you're losing is happening much faster. So, it's interesting because on the one hand, you could say that impermanence is the source of suffering, but it's just as true that impermanence is it's the solution to suffering as well. It's a double-edged sword because there are things that happen that you're glad things will change, right? That saying that they have in the Jewish community, this too shall pass. When things are bad, when there's suffering going on, when situations are dire, they say that. And that's referring to the fact that the impermanence in this particular way of understanding it is a good thing, because we don't want things to stay the way they are when they're that bad. So on the one hand, they'll pass, so you can look at it that way when you're suffering. On the other hand, it's a source of suffering because we will end up losing everything. So this business of being able to access the refuge is the question at hand. What will empower us, what will make it possible to enter the refuge, to be able to escape the suffering and the negative consequences of losing control when things get difficult? Well, the answer to that question, it goes back to the basic teaching, which is to practice meditation every day with the idea that when you need it, it'll be there. With the idea that if you get practiced sufficiently and you're able to experience your true nature, you're able to experience that which is unaffected by situations and circumstances, then when the shit hits the fan, you can retreat to that place. And even if things are so crazy, even if your thinking is so crazy and your emotions are off the rails, and you really are in a unstable place, if you can retreat to being the awareness of it so that you can notice it, you can see the thinking, you can be aware of the emotions and the physical sensations, but you're not identified with them, then you can practice not acting on those thoughts or feelings. And you can practice understanding that this too shall pass. It doesn't make it any more pleasant to experience it, but at least you're not identified with it, and at least it's not going to cause you to do things that are irretractable. Another thing that's important to take under consideration when it comes to this subject is what Michael Singer calls practicing with the low-hanging fruit. This is why it's so important to practice dealing with your road rage, to practice dealing with your little annoyances that go on all the time during the day. If you can have success in practicing with those things, when the bigger things come, you will have the muscle. You'll have the muscle, to deal with it. And so it's very important. And the other thing that's important to understand is even if you're fortunate enough to be in good circumstances where there's nothing seriously wrong, nothing seriously threatening you, it's still important to practice this way because in time that will change. It's like I say, the inevitables are there. As you get older, there's no escaping the effects of old age. There's no escaping sickness. There is no escaping death. So the more you're able to experience a refuge from the slings and arrows of the everyday things that are problematic, the stronger you are when the time comes to deal with the big stuff. As a matter of fact, David Radin, my teacher, often says when you're sitting down to meditate, allow yourself to experience that when you sit there and you go into meditation practice, allow yourself to experience that you're dying. Allow yourself to die there. What does he mean by that? Allow yourself to let go of the identification with the idea that you're a body and a personality. That's a death. That's the only real death there is. You know, the only thing that's going to die is the physical body and the personality. So if you sit down to meditate, what you're practicing is that your true nature is neither one of those things. And so if you sit there and follow the breath and allow yourself to have enough of a gap between you and your mind, enough space for the thoughts and feelings, that you can experience a sense of well-being even in the midst of negative activity, even in the midst of negative thoughts, even in the midst of negative emotions. That's a real payoff. I mean, that's a real time when you realize the benefit of the practice. When you're in situations like that and you're able to fall into the truth, fall into your true nature, and witness what's happening without identifying with it. It's often the case, you know, a friend of mine who has recently had one of those occasions in his life where somebody stole his identity and wiped out his computer, and he's an author, he had all his writing on there, all his pictures on there. And they were able to get into his identity and try and steal money out of the bank. And it's a long story, but you know, when he was sharing with me the details of what happened, it would literally drive anybody crazy to have that much to deal with, and to try and go through everything that's necessary to try and get your identity back. He was actually considering changing his name and starting all over again. That's how bad it was. So one of the things I said to him in the email that I responded when he was sharing about this is I said, are you practicing meditation? Because in situations like that, that may be the only thing that saves your sanity, you know, that sometimes so much can go wrong that literally you feel like you're insane. Mm-hmm. You know, if you imagine what it's like to be in Gaza right now. You know, I mean, even with what happened to my friend losing his identity, you know, that's a huge upset. But compared to being in Gaza right now, where, you know, your home just got blown up last night, and you have no possessions now, you don't have food to eat, you don't know where to go, you don't know when the next bomb's going to drop. That's crazy making. You look at some of the faces of the people that you see on the news, right? You can see the horror in their face, the terror in their face. They're insanely terrified, insanely terrified. So on the one hand, it's an opportunity for us to appreciate the good karma we have, that we're not in Gaza. On the other hand, it's an opportunity for us to realize our day will come. Our day will come. It may not be Gaza, but we're going to lose everything. Isn't that the same? Yeah. So it's important to understand the significance of these teachings and practices. This is not a hobby. This is not something to take lightly. This is something that can change the experience you're having of yourself in your life. And it can have an impact on circumstances. It can have an impact on your physical body. You know, you can live longer because you're practicing meditation. You can have better relationships because you're practicing meditation. You can have more sanity because you're practicing meditation. You can experience more of being available to life in a positive way, where you're appreciating all the beautiful, wonderful things that are available to us all the time. But because of the fact that we tend to be reactive and we tend to be in survival mode, we don't notice those things. You know, the world is a beautiful place, you know. And there are things going on around us all the time that are, you know, ordinary, seemingly ordinary things, but when you slow down and pay attention, there's nothing ordinary about it. It's extraordinary. Human life is an extraordinary experience. So even if you don't have anything major going on, one of the things that you might want to consider is being more awake, more available to being in touch with life, more available to be aware of the beauty of life, the wonder of life, the preciousness of life, the sacredness of life. What my teacher shares is that's what is available when you experience the awakened state. That everything, I mean, if you look at the Dalai Lama is a good example of an awake human being because he had the good fortune of being raised by teachers when he was a baby. He was being raised by enlightened human beings. So he started out with all the right material. You know, he didn't have to learn not to be his personality. He knew from the very beginning he wasn't his personality. So he's an example, he's a model of what awakeness looks like. And if you look at him, he's always laughing, he's always smiling. He never enters a room without going over to the people in the room and shaking their hands and making contact with them and looking them in the eyes, because he understands if there's 1,000 people in the room, there's 1,000 selves in the room, there's 1,000 Buddhas in the room, there's 1,000 Dalai Lamas in the room. So he's always making contact with his true nature every time he shakes hands with a stranger. He's making contact with his true nature. And he's very peaceful. You know, I've noticed when I have a video of him doing a presentation in Wisconsin with Dr. Richie Davidson, with the whole auditorium full of people. And he started wearing baseball hats to these things because of the lighting, you know, it was in his eyes. So he had a baseball cap on. And he's sitting there, and Richie Davidson's sitting next to him, and Richie Davidson is talking to the audience. And the Dalai Lama's sitting there, and you see him going like this. That's how relaxed the man is. You know, sometimes staying awake is hard for him because he's so calm and he's so peaceful and he's so relaxed, you know, that he has to keep bringing himself back to the situation he finds himself in. These are the kinds of things that we should pay attention to. These are the things that we should realize are available to all of us. Right? But you've got to be willing to practice consistently. You can't expect to hit home runs just because you have a baseball bat. You know, you've got to practice this consistently, and not only formally, you know, but as you go through the day. That's what the formal practice is all about, you know, strengthening your ability to experience the truth. So as you go through the day and you're faced with the challenges of life, you can stay connected to reality. You can stay awake and aware of the truth. Because we live in a world that's challenging, you know. We live in a very challenging situation these days. The political situation is ridiculous. It's gotten ridiculous. You know, leaders, world leaders, accusing each other of having body odor. World leaders accusing each other of stupid, ridiculous things that you wouldn't accuse, you know, somebody in your own household of. And this is being broadcast as these are role models. You know, people who still accept the idea that murder is acceptable. And that's true for all world leaders, right? Because, you know, we live in a country that has a short memory. You know, there's all this talk about the fear of nuclear holocaust. Well, which country dropped the first atom bomb? So we're all in the same boat here. It's not a question of what country you're in. It's a question of realizing that humankind, human nature, is still more animal. We're still more of an animal than we are a saint. You know, we're still subject to acting out our worst impulses and then justifying that and talking about it in the world conversation as if it's an acceptable reality. You know, to have a country that's caught in the middle of a conflict where 20,000 people, innocent people, are murdered, and this is considered to be somehow acceptable. I look forward to the day, if it is to happen, I look forward to the day when there's enough awakeness in the world that the humanity at large will refuse to accept that. Anybody that would do something like that would be ostracized. Anybody that would do something like that would be pointed out, to be a manifestation of ignorance and a manifestation of everything that's dark and negative. But, we have to start somewhere, and where we start is with our own personal lives. When I went to hear the Dalai Lama talk, the talk he gave was about war. And what he said about war is, he said, the beginning of ending war as an acceptable reality in the world starts with us personally, because we don't tend to pay attention to it, but we are at war with ourselves. We're at war with ourselves. The mental state that we live our lives in and the emotional state that we live our lives in has us reject ourselves and not love ourselves and not take care of ourselves the same way we would reject others and not take care of them either. So this war that's going on internally, these negative feelings about yourself, these negative impulses, the guilt, the shame, the confusion, this is an internal war that's going on. And so if we want to expect that there's no war in the world, it has to start with there being no world in any individual human being. And that's why when we practice in meditation, we're paying attention to the natural state. We're trying to get out of the mental state, which is where all the war is, and move attention to the natural state, which is the awareness itself, and to experience when we're paying attention to that, when we're really free from thought and paying attention to that, we experience the possibility of peace, satisfaction, happiness, and well-being, our true nature. Our actual true nature. It's available at all times. But it's not going to be readily available if your habit is to think all the time. It's not going to be readily available if you're caught up in dealing with things as they occur to you in thought and emotion. We've got to break out of that. And how you break out of that is you've got to start paying attention, not just when you're doing formal meditation. You've got to start paying attention as you're moving around in your life and start noticing who you're being. Start noticing whether you're being your personality or whether you're being your true nature, whether you're being in the natural state. And you'll see that most of the time you will catch yourself being in this character that you think is you. And even when you are awake, what happens, I've experienced this myself, and I know it's true of some of the teachers that I've listened to who are awake. Of course, we're still going to have a personality, but they talk about their personality like it's a comic strip character, not who they are. And they can talk about their personality like it's a comic strip character and it's not who they are because they're not being that. They're aware of it. They're aware that that thinking is there. They're aware that those emotions are there, but that's not their identity. So they can refer to it in that regard, and they're not living from there. They're living from the truth. So it's a real possibility. That's what the inspiration is. That's one of the reasons that I love to listen to good teachers that are speaking very clearly, because what they're doing is they're modeling the possibility. They're saying this possibility is available, and they're not unique. They're not the chosen ones. This whole chosen one thing is a mistake. We're all chosen. We're all chosen one. How can there be chosen ones when we're all the same awareness? So that's what I want to emphasize tonight, is the idea that prepare for the worst and understand that freedom is available. You can be free from suffering. You can be free from being stuck as a character that's surviving all day long, and start to experience what life is really all about. It's not about suffering, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. The most important thing you want to aim for in your life is when you're on your deathbed, to have experienced the life worth living. To not lie there and be terrified because what's ending now never actually happened. To be able to lie there and let go and know that you were here, you did live your life, you did come out of being in survival, you have no regrets, you have no guilt, you have no shame, and you can truly rest in peace. That's one of the beauties of my teacher up in Ithaca. When he's been in situations where it looked like the end, he reported that he was very calm and relaxed and just, ready to go. That's a blessing, that's a gift. When the time comes to take your last breath, to be ready to go is a blessing, to be able to relax and to know the truth. And to know that the only death that is real death is the death of the personality and the death of the physical body. That's the time when the test that's the test time. That's the litmus test. When the body's going and the personality is ready to come to an end. If you've done your homework, at that point, you will know that there's an awareness there that can be aware of this, watch this happen, but it's not happening to the awareness. And that's why you can be at ease and relaxed. So that's what's available. That's the possibility.